In a quiet town where nothing ever happened, Pastor Elijah was seen as a blessing. He wasn't just a preacher. He was a symbol of hope, a man with healing hands and powerful sermons that made people cry, repent, and believe. His church was always full, and his words echoed far beyond the four walls. People came from other towns just to hear him speak. He had a beautiful wife named Grace, who was 8 months pregnant, and 2 children who everyone adored. They were the picture of a perfect family, always smiling, always together. But one Sunday morning, something felt different. The pastor stood alone at the pulpit. His wife and children were gone. No explanation, no announcement, just gone. He told the congregation that Grace had gone to visit family, that she needed rest, that everything was fine. People believed him. Why wouldn't they? He was a man of God. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, whispers started to grow. Where was Grace? Why wasn't she answering calls? Why didn't anyone hear from her family? And why was the pastor now locking the church at night? Something he had never done before. Rumors started, but no one could have imagined the terrible truth hiding beneath the surface, a truth that would eventually crawl out, screaming, begging to be heard, and demanding justice. You said, "Write a script for my faceless video title." Popular pastor buried his pregnant wife and children under his church. Then this happened. The resulted script should be engaging, thrilling, and suspenseful for my audience, and script should be easy to understand by using simple English. Don not suggest scenes and clips. Write in paragraph form. First you have to write a hook and first section in long paragraph form. And next write a detailed script into 3 sections. Each section contains 5,000 characters. ChatGPT said, "Updated saved memory." You said, "Give me." ChatGPT said, "Sure. Here's the hook and first long paragraph, introductory section of your video script." Based on the title, Hook, the whole town thought he was a man of God. They trusted him, followed him, and gave him everything. But no one saw the evil growing behind his holy smile. Until one day someone stepped inside the church and discovered a horrifying secret buried beneath the altar. What they found shook the nation, and it all started with a popular pastor and the sudden disappearance of his pregnant wife and 2 innocent children. Opening paragraph, long intro. In a quiet town where nothing ever happened, Pastor Elijah was seen as a blessing. He wasn't just a preacher. He was a symbol of hope, a man with healing hands and powerful sermons that made people cry, repent, and believe. His church was always full, and his words echoed far beyond the 4 walls. People came from other towns just to hear him speak. He had a beautiful wife named Grace, who was 8 months pregnant, and 2 children who everyone adored. They were the picture of a perfect family, always smiling, always together. But one Sunday morning, something felt different. The pastor stood alone at the pulpit. His wife and children were gone. No explanation, no announcement, just gone. He told the congregation that Grace had gone to visit family, that she needed rest, that everything was fine. People believed him. Why wouldn't they? He was a man of God. But as days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, whispers started to grow. Where was Grace? Why wasn't she answering calls? Why didn't anyone hear from her family? And why was the pastor now locking the church at night? Something he had never done before. Rumors started, but no one could have imagined the terrible truth hiding beneath the surface, a truth that would eventually crawl out, screaming, begging to be heard, and demanding justice. Now, I will begin section 1 of the detailed script. It will be around 5,000 characters long. Let me know if you're ready for me to continue with section 1, or if you want to change anything above first. You said, "Yes, ChatGPT." Said, "Great. Here's section 1 of your script, written in a suspenseful and engaging way using simple English. This section begins to peel back the layers behind Pastor Elijah's perfect image and hints at the disturbing truth. Section 1. The Disappearance. It all began 3 months before the truth came out, on a rainy Wednesday night, when the pastor's wife, Grace, was last seen leaving the local grocery store with her 2 children. She was smiling at the cashier, buying baby formula, milk, and a bouquet of white lilies. No one knew that would be the last time anyone outside the church saw her alive. The next Sunday, Pastor Elijah stood before the congregation as if nothing had happened. His voice was calm, his sermon powerful, but people noticed something odd. He didn't mention Grace or the kids. He didn't even look sad. When one of the elders asked about them after service, he laughed softly and said, "They're with Grace's mother. She needed some rest." That explanation was enough. For most people, at first. But there was one woman in the church who wasn't so sure. Her name was Mama Ruth, an old member, sharp-eyed and deeply spiritual. She had watched Grace grow into a woman, marry Elijah, and raise their children. She knew that Grace would never leave without telling her. And she found it strange that Grace hadn't posted anything on social media, not even a photo of her growing baby bump, for almost a month. Mama Ruth tried to call. The number didn't go through. She messaged. No reply. So she went to Grace's mother, only to find out something shocking. Grace hadn't visited her at all. In fact, she hadn't heard from her daughter in weeks. That was the moment Mama Ruth knew something was terribly wrong. She returned to the church that night and waited until everyone had gone home. The building was quiet, except for the sound of wind blowing against the stained glass windows. She walked to the pastor's office, but it was locked. She stepped into the prayer room, also locked. That's when she noticed a strange smell in the main hall, a mixture of wet earth and something else, something rotten. She didn't want to jump to conclusions, but her instincts screamed. She left that night shaken, and the next morning, she went to the police. At first, no one took her seriously. After all, Pastor Elijah was a respected man. He donated to schools, visited the sick, and even paid for some members' rent. Why would a man like that harm his own wife and children? But when police tried to contact Grace and couldn't reach her either, they decided to do a wellness check. What they found at the couple's house made the situation even stranger. The house was clean. Too clean. Clothes were missing from Grace's side of the closet, but her favorite necklace, one she never took off, was still hanging on the dresser. The kids' toys were gone, but their school books were still on the table. And in the nursery, everything was untouched, like a baby had never been expected at all. The pastor showed up during the check, smiling like nothing was wrong. He invited the officers in, offered them tea, and explained that Grace had decided to have the baby at her mother's home in another state. When asked for the address, he said he couldn't remember it, but he'd get it later. When asked why she hadn't contacted anyone, he said she needed a break from everyone, even him. That answer was strange, but not illegal. The police left, but not before noting how calm the pastor was. Too calm. Over the next few days, more people began asking questions. Why hadn't Grace's phone been used? Why had her bank account suddenly gone inactive? Why had the church's basement been renovated 2 weeks before she disappeared? And why was the pastor now staying at the church almost every night, alone? Mama Ruth couldn't shake her fear. She decided to break the rules. One night, just after midnight, she used her old keys to enter the church. She crept through the hallway, her footsteps echoing against the cold tile floor. Everything was dark, except for a single light coming from under the pulpit. That's when she saw it, the trapdoor, a door that had never been there before. She approached slowly, heart pounding. The smell hit her again, stronger now. She bent down, pulled the small wooden handle, and opened the trapdoor. A rush of cold, damp air escaped. And down below, in the shadows, she saw something that made her drop her flashlight. A blanket. A tiny baby's blanket. And beneath it, freshly turned soil. She ran out of the church, screaming, straight to the police. The next morning, investigators returned with tools, cameras, and a warrant. They lifted the trapdoor and began to dig. What they found made grown officers cry. 3 bodies, 1 woman, 2 children, and the unborn child still inside her. The whole town went silent. As news of the horrifying discovery spread, the entire town was shaken. People who had once trusted Pastor Elijah with their lives now looked at him with disgust, fear, and confusion. The man who had baptized their children, married their daughters, prayed over their sick, had just been arrested for burying his own pregnant wife and children beneath the church he built with holy hands. No one wanted to believe it, but the truth was too loud, too real, and too rotten to ignore. Police began their investigation immediately. They questioned everyone: church staff, neighbors, close friends, and even old members who had left the church quietly over the years. Bit by bit, a darker picture began to form. Elijah wasn't who he said he was. Before he came to this town, he had changed his name. His real name was not Elijah Matthews, it was Daniel Obasi. He had moved across 3 different states in the past 10 years, starting new churches each time. And in each of those towns, something strange had happened. Missing members, sudden church fires, stolen donation, but that was just the beginning.